Go ahead.
Am I on?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I think we recognize this object to be what it is. It's a feather. A feather's a pretty neat thing. It's recyclable. In the age of the 90s, when we're talking about Earth Day and recycling, I think this could be the symbol for recycling. The bird uses this feather extensively, and we all know it needs it for its main mode of transportation, flight. If it wasn't for the feather and being streamlined and positioned just right and having the correct surface area, the bird couldn't fly. The bird uses the feather for a lot more things than just flying. It uses it for insulation. There's, depending on the habitat of the bird, and then you have different degrees of insulation from water and water repellent. And it also has like the soft down feathers deep inside that keep them warm, especially the waterfowl. Also coloration. I know we've seen all these birds flying around, and the male birds are so bright and beautiful, and the females, they have all those old dull colors, and that's just the way it goes, I guess. But the males, they have those bright colors. They need them to date for spring, so they have to get out and attract people. And I mean, they're female birds of their species, and the females, they have to have these dull, more earth tone colors because they need to sit on the nest, and they need to guard the nest. They need to be hidden and be quiet. They don't be seen by those predators. Camouflage. And through history, I mean, man has used the feather too. I mean, you see the big quills, the feather piece they use is a hollow shaft. It could be filled up with ink and you could write with it. The Indians used them for prayer feathers, especially the eagle feather. Also, Indian tribes that are marked had two feathers, one to mark the clan and one to mark like if you were Cherokee, what nation you were. And that let people know who you were, the symbols, what you could be. And all through history, I mean, the feather is recyclable. You could use it whatever you need to use it for. I have a down pillow. My roommate has a down bedspread. My grandmother slept on a feather mattress. So I think the feather is a neat thing.
Yeah.
I hate doing that.
You did a good job.
You did good.
Thank you.
I wanted to introduce myself in case you all don't know. My name's Amy Ayers, and I'm going to be at Big Ridge this summer. And my example to show you here is not some of the tinder that Charlie was using in his fire demonstration, although it looks very similar in materials. This is, as she was saying, with the feather. I thought this would be a good follow-up with the nest. And it was very interesting when I was coming in for the morning a little late. A little child had brought this up to me. And of course she knew what it was, and she said where she had found it. And so when I was talking to her, I said, well, how do you think it got there? And she was talking, we were discussing different things, and she's pretty much told me it wasn't a ground-dwelling bird, because that, as far as survival, that's not a very good technique, except in places where there are no, like, snakes and small rodents and stuff that would eat the eggs. So we decided it came from a tree. So it's still, we had the question of how did it get on the ground. And the only thing we could figure out is the storm on Thursday must have blown it out of the tree, and it was on the ground, and she was able to find it that way. And we were discussing birds and how much energy goes into a nest, and it was a question of why build a nest. And then in talking, we decided that the eggs won't sit up in the crook of a tree without some help. And as far as nest building goes and the kind of time that goes into it, birds invest so much energy, and it's not very much unlike a human parent. The birds, whichever, whether it's a male or female, will choose the ideal place. Like a person will go out with a realtor and either pick lakefront property or wood property. And then once they do that, they go ahead and start collecting materials. The bird will, like in this case, use vines. There's some hair, little twigs and stuff. As humans choose brick, or they'll choose wood. They'll choose the type of shingles they want, and then the birds probably do a little better than humans. They do all the construction themselves. We pay somebody to do it. Some of us are industrious enough to build our own homes. I wouldn't be. And then after that, then they go in and occupy it like a human family would, or the start of a human family. And birds spend an awful lot of time after the eggs are hatched. After the eggs are laid, they sit on them. They keep them the correct temperature. After they're hatched, they expend an awful lot of energy gathering food for the clutch, bringing it back to them, just as our parents raised us. And just like with humans, when the babies are old enough to fend for themselves, they take off and they probably never come back and visit their parents again. You know, an occasional phone call or something is about all we invest. But as far as architectural wonders, this is just as fascinating, and probably more so than a home, and what they can do without the benefit of saws and hammers and nails, and yet it serves the same function, and it raises the family just as effectively as our parents do in a home. And I just thought that was very fascinating, and I wanted to share that.
Very good.
All right. I'm Dave Robinson, and I'll be up at Roan Mountain this summer. These are black oak leaves. The leaves from the oak trees represent a major part of our ecosystem here. The leaves are mainly used for photosynthesis by the tree. The leaves receive light, they break, and they use that to break down carbon dioxide and stuff into sugars, and that gives gives energy to the tree through the sugars that it makes. As a byproduct of this process, the trees release oxygen into the atmosphere, which we all breathe and all living organisms need. Once in the fall, the leaves start changing colors and eventually fall to the ground and become part of the litter on the ground. And through nature's forces, it breaks down the leaves into litter and stuff, and this provides nutrients for the trees itself and for many other things in the forest. And the another part of the tree that is vital to the ecosystem are the nuts, like acorns, hickory nuts, and things. Those fall off into the tree or onto the ground, and are used by squirrels, deer, and many other organisms in the forest. I also like to say that the leaves, they're not all the same. They're like snowflakes. They're big, little. I think these are the same trees or leaves off the same tree. And notice the size difference. And I just want to say that they're really an important part of what goes on in the forest.
Yeah.
Fumble now.
Me too.
This should come with a jug of lemonade.
My name is Michael Sanders, and I'll be the naturalist recreationist up at Standing Stone State Park this summer. Bob Fulcher was out walking through the woods yesterday, and he brought this bag, and he said, what does this represent? What kind of answers can we get out of this? What can we interpret from this object here? Well, when I first looked at it, I thought it was a very young spike duck. Well, I had one part right. It was a spike duck, but it wasn't. Turns out that it was 4 years old, and someone told me that it was, they could tell by the teeth. And by looking at the dentin and the wear of the teeth, you can tell how old a deer is. Well, that information is good if you want to be a wildlife manager or a biologist. It'll tell you something like production. If you find a lot of young skulls, you know that there's a lot of productivity. Or if you find a lot of them, skulls in general, they'll tell you that a lot of deer are dying off. That'll tell you a lot about certain ways to manage your area. Well, that's all fine, but I think this represents something more when you get down on the grassroots level. We heard a nice talk about recycling here. Well, I think this is a fine example here. You hear it in stories and songs, and the Bible tells us ashes to ashes, dust to dust. What goes around comes around. You've heard that. Life is a circle. Well, that's true. And this is this represents something I think maybe we nowadays are getting away from. Back in the earlier time, we had to deal with death, because death certainly is a part of life. And now that modern medicine makes most of us live longer, we don't have to deal with that as much as people did then. And this, more than anything else, I think represents that. It's that we come and we spend our time and then we go. The materials in this, the calcium, bones are made of calcium, of course. Again, a cycle. The deer eats the plant, gets its calcium, and then after, when you find one of these laying in the woods, maybe a chipmunk, squirrel, whatever, uses this as a food source and obtains calcium that way. So everything is a cycle, I guess. As far as uses for this go, she talked about the ornamentation that the Indians, of the feathers that many Indians use. Well, according to Lewis and Clark and many of the records that was kept, they used these skulls for a bowl or a drinking dish. Indians could use these as, and you've seen a lot on their headdresses, they'll have one of these, or maybe as a necklace. So, what type of symbol it represents, I'm not sure. But, so it does have uses. And, so there is use for everything. And, again, recycling, I think, you see it nowadays, it's such a big push. Well, you know, we get blasted with it every day. You know, they even make you feel guilty if you're not doing things. But as I said, there's nothing new under the sun that has been going on for generations.
Very good.
Okay, the object I want to talk to you today has to deal with survival of the fittest. We compete every day in our workforce. We go to work on the jobs and things, trying to make money, everything, so we can buy our food and compete in life. The same similar thing goes on in nature. As for instance, what happened to this poor little creature here. He was out at night scavenging around for his food sources and everything, unsuspecting of maybe an owl sitting up on a branch somewhere, and the owl, with its keen eyesight and its sensitive hearing, listens he heard the little rustle in the sound. With his ears are slightly, one's a little bit up above, with the other one he can hone right in on that. Even if he can't see it, he can pinpoint it with his hearing. And he swooped down without anything, with a shrew or mouse or anything, not even suspecting anything, with its feathers and things, the way they're fixed, that you can't even hear them in flight. He swoops down on his victim, he kills it, takes it back up, and eats it. And what parts doesn't digest later on, he'll sit back, and if you ever notice one, they'll just eventually just ingest it. They don't vomit, they just ingest the thing there. And if you notice, looking at these little things, you can find hair, bones, and things that mainly the things they can't ingest.
I can't take it anymore. Okay, my name is Lana Mitchell, and I'm going to be at Warriors Path in Kingsport this summer. And what I have in my hand, in case you don't know, are pine needles. And these are leaves that come from pine trees. And even though they don't look like a maple leaf or an oak leaf, they are leaves. When they're on the trees, they are green, so they carry on photosynthesis. They can make their own food, okay? But they are leaves. We can take these pine needles and determine what type of pine tree that it came off of. For instance, some pine trees, if you notice, the pine needles are in clusters, okay? Different pine trees will have a different number of needles in one bundle. Some may have 2 in a bundle, some may have 3 or 5, but we can use the pine needles to determine the identification of the pine tree. Another thing we can do with the pine needles or the pine trees, we can determine like slope exposure. Have you ever been like hiking on a trail and when you round the side of a ridge it suddenly gets dry and hot? Well, if you stop and look, most of the time you'll find some type of pine tree there. And this would be the south-facing slope. It's hot and it's dry, whereas the north-facing slope would be cool and moist. But you can always find some type of pine tree on the south-facing slope. Another thing about pine trees would be some grow at different elevations, so you could like determine forest types or vegetation types by the pine trees themselves. Some, for instance, like the Table Mountain pine will only grow at higher elevations, where at lower elevations you would not find the Table Mountain pine. And I also found out this morning that you can also use these pine needles to weave. At one time they were used for weaving. So you can see that there's several things when you just walk by a pine tree and you see these things laying there. It's important that you stop and look and think, well, wait a minute, why are these laying on the ground, or where did they come from? Because they are important, okay?
What I have here is no longer to be thought of as bark. This is skin. This is what protects the trees from all the bad things that can infest it or attack it or threaten it in any way, just like our skin protects our organs and our muscles. This protects the tree from fire, from insects, from man sometimes if it's tough enough. And another neat thing that it does is it provides homes for a lot of interesting things, sometimes things that you have a real hard time finding. I don't know if any of you have ever seen the moths that can duplicate the colors and almost the textures of different barks. So you have to really start looking closely to pick them out. Also, it provides real good homes. Certain types of bark, in particular this kind that has lots of grooves, is a good place for certain seeds to take hold. A lot of epiphytes, things that maybe we haven't thought of it as epiphytes, lichens. When I got this one, there was a little piece of moss in it, which probably won't stay too long now that this is in my possession. And there are some seeds wedged in here. If you've ever seen mistletoe, it's real prone to, well, the only way it can propagate is to wedge itself in the bark of a tree, preferably up high, which is usually where it is, since for birds deposit it. But besides just the bark and something that we don't notice at all, this serves a big purpose, and this particular part of it isn't living, but it's protecting all the life processes that are going on inside the tree, and it does a really good job. If it wasn't there, the tree would have a hard time existing.
Hi, I'm Amber Johnson. I'm going to be the historical interpreter at the Carter Mansion in Elizabeth in the summer. And Bobby handed me this piece of ceramics and said, interpret it. There are actually a lot of things that you can tell from something like this. And I'm not going to talk about this piece specifically, but about ceramics in general. The archaeologists who have worked in the Southwest and in Africa and in the Near East have really relied on ceramics a great deal in telling about the cultures of the people who lived there and who made them. You can see in this one, you can see striations that go around. You can tell it was made on a potter's wheel because there are things that encircle it completely. You can tell that whoever made this piece of ceramics was pretty good, and they had done a lot of them because it's uniform in thickness, and the rim is uniform. The lines that decorate it are straight and precisely spaced. But just out of context, ceramics can't tell you nearly as much as they can, or any other artifact can, when it's in the ground. When it's in the ground, it's in association with other artifacts. It's in association with natural or man-made features, which can let you know if you just happen to walk by it and see a piece of ceramics that looks like it's next to where a well was. It may be broken. You can maybe find all of the pieces to a pot or a jar all in one place. Or you can often find several artifacts scattered near a hearth. Those sorts of things, when we find them in context and leave them for archaeologists to come and very carefully take apart and interpret, can tell us a whole lot about not only what the people who were living then made, but what kind of activities they were involved in and what things they were doing with the things they made. You can determine types of ceremonies, or whether a jar was used for carrying water from a well, or whether it was used for cooking over a fire. You can see where things have been burned on the bottom. Ceramics change color when they've been heated, and often on the cooking jars there are still pieces of food stuck inside when they're broken and discarded. So there's really a whole lot you can tell from a broken piece of pottery like this that most people would just walk past and say, somebody didn't clean this place up. But it's important that we leave them where they are, so that the people who know what to look for will be able to find out some things about the people who used to live there and the people who used to make this. Right. Well, my name is Marlene Taylor, and I'm the naturalist for Cumberland Mountain State Park this summer. And Bobby gave this to me to use. It's a toy, of course, and it was made by a man who is no longer living. His name is Hanson Howard, and he made his living making brooms during his lifetime, but he also discovered he had this talent for carving, and I understand he became quite popular and active in his animal sculptures, and they're workable, as you can see. This one is joined together with a string, and so I thought I would take this opportunity to talk a little bit about why he might have chosen a snake to use, or to carve. It's made out of cedar. Snakes, as you probably know, have a very mystical character, and have had for centuries and centuries. The Greeks gave a lot of power to snakes. There's one legend that people believe that snakes were immortal for one reason, because of the way they shed their skin. They shed their skin all at once, and they're a beautiful new creature just as soon as that skin is gone. And they thought that might have given them immortality, but also the fact that they don't have eyelids, so they didn't think they ever slept, and that's one reason why they thought they might be immortal. They've been feared and given a lot of power through the ages. Of course, I think it's argued whether our fear of snakes comes from an innate trait that's passed on to us, or whether it's an environmental effect that's given to us from our parents and grandparents. We'll probably never know the answer to that, but history and mythology, you know about the Medusa. And she was so feared that this open-mouthed creature with the hair of snakes, if you looked upon her, you would instantly turn to stone. And the Greek goddess, war goddess Athena, who was a masculine goddess who was very much admired by the Greek society, on her shield was a carving of the Medusa because she was one who was able to overpower the Medusa. In the medical world, you see the symbol of the intertwining snakes. I believe that's called the caduceus. It just dawned on me as I was reading over this that, you know, gosh, those two words are awfully familiar, so I'll have to research that a little more. But, you know, they had power of, maybe because of their immortality or because of their very strong venom in the poisonous snakes, were they a symbol of healing power and health. I know that sounds contradictory, but... And also, I'd like to take this opportunity, as you see, there are many, many vertebrae here, and snakes can have up to 500 vertebrae. That is one of the keys to their success, and they are a very successful animal. They're in all parts of the world except the Arctic and Antarctic. One theory is that they were once a burrowing animal and they lost the use of their limbs, so they have to be pretty agile in order to survive. I wanted to demonstrate, if I could, to you the types of movements snakes are so agile. If you were holding the snakes that John had earlier, you can just hold them in your hand like this. I mean, you know, that's what makes snakes fun to hold, is because you can do that. But the most common movement for snakes is called the serpentine movement, and this is one most snakes use. They will use a rock, an exposed tree limb, the rough surface of the ground, and as a point of pressure, and will push their body against the rock and move in S shapes. You can use your imagination a little bit on this because I can't quite get down on the ground. And that is also the way all snakes swim. Whether they move this way on the ground or not, that is the way they will. That's the movement they use when they're in the water. Second type of movement is called the caterpillar crawl, or the rectilinear type of movement. And this is one that the heavy-bodied snakes use, like the boas and pythons. And they just simply use those broad scales on their belly, those long broad scales, and scrunch them up and then push forward, and scrunch up and push forward. That seems to be the easiest way for them to get around. Another type of movement is the concertina, or I'll just say concertina because I'm not sure about that. I didn't bring my dictionary. This one is more unusual in that the snake will scrunch its body up and propel itself with its tail, and then it pulls up its tail and propels itself out. I don't know how many snakes, I don't think that is the most common type of movement that is used. And the other one, of course, is the sidewinding. And that one is where the snake throws successive loops of its body forward, and it leaves, you see this in the sand, it leaves oblique lines where it straightens its body out, and then it throws a loop and straightens its body out. So, next time you see a snake, you might notice which type of movement it's using, and think about all those many, many vertebrae that it has that allows it to move in such a manner. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Jonathan Moore, and I'll be at Davy Crockett Birthplace this summer. I'd like to start off and take y'all back about 200 years to when my family moved from Greenville to the present-day Morristown area. And my father constructed a tavern in that area on the road from Knoxville to Washington. A couple years later, a man by the name of Jacob Schuyler come by my father's tavern, and he was on his way to Virginia, taking a herd of cattle. I stayed up and listened to Jacob's tales for about an hour and went on to bed. My father woke me, what I considered in the middle of the night, and said, "Davy, pack you up a couple of sets of clothes. You're going with Jacob, and you're going to help him." He said, "You're 12 years old, and it's the time you become a man." And so, I had a lot of respect for my father, and I didn't really understand his judgment at the time. So I gathered my things together, and as I was getting ready to leave with Jacob, my father called me over, and he handed me this cattle whip. And he said, "This has been in our family for many generations, and I want you to take this with you. And always remember that you'll be a part of our family. And this is one way that you'll take us with you on your time and on your hard days ahead." So I headed out with Jacob. And Jacob and me had some bad times. We didn't really get along that good. And we ended up in Virginia. And I guess that was one of the best things about our trip, was I ended up about 3 miles from the Natural Bridge. I got to see this wonderful bridge that nature had made. And when I come back to Tennessee and back to my family, I was really, glad to be able to pass that on about this natural bridge that I had seen. And as I went on through life, I always carried with me the values of my father, because this was the first thing he ever gave me besides a whipping, and I thought this was really, really something. And I hope, in my lifetime to pass it on to my family. Thank you.